people here too long. So feel free to take food, and I'll get started. Lex, I'm gonna get started. Is that good? Do you let me know? And good. Thumbs up. Okay. All right. Hi. Welcome, everyone. We're really happy to see everybody here. I'm sorry for the delays. There have been a number of kind of technical issues on a Friday morning. It's tough to get everything going. But I'm thrilled to see everyone here. It's really wonderful. Welcome, everybody who's walking in. There's bagels and lox and cream cheese and tomatoes. Please take some food and enjoy. It's a good thing to have on a Friday morning, especially after a really difficult week. So we're glad to see everyone here. Glad to see everybody here. Happy and healthy. That door's supposed to be locked, Yael. Do you want to just check in with Dwayne and see what's going on with that? So I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name's Kirsten Vermeglish. I am a professor of history and Jewish studies here at Michigan State. I'm in the Sterling Institute for Jewish Studies in Modern Israel, which is sponsoring this event, Beyond Recall by Dr. Jakob Eisler. Thrilled that you could come, thrilled that you can be here. Before we get started, and before I introduce Dr. Eisler, I'm just going to thank some of our co-sponsors. I'm going to thank everyone in the room, people who I know are visiting from all over the country and the world. So welcome to all of you. It's wonderful to have you here. I also want to thank people in my IH 211C class for representing. Thank you very much. Enjoy the food. I'm really glad you guys came. Let me first also thank our co-sponsors. So we've had a lot of people that have helped to make this event happen. This event is co-sponsored by the College of Arts and Letters. This is all Michigan State University. The College of Arts and Letters, James Madison College, the College of Social Science, the Residential College of Arts and Humanities, International Studies and Programs, the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, the Department of History, and the Center for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies, the College of Music, and German Studies. So a lot of people have worked on this. I also want to announce for you some of the other events that we have coming up for the Sterling Institute that you might be interested in. Tomorrow, Saturday, on campus. So Saturday, October 14th, we are going to be presenting a world premiere film and symphonic program called The Lost Rhapsody, a World War II survival story and musical legacy. It's at 7:30 p.m. at the MSU Fairchild Theater. It is free for students, faculty, for MSU students. MSU faculty and staff can also get there for free if you contact Ariana Menzel. It is going to be it is a film event, a documentary film event. Talking about the life of Leo Spellman, who is a composer who was also a Holocaust survivor. Amy Simon, professor of Holocaust studies, and I'm sorry I don't have your full title up, will be offering an introduction, and then there will be a documentary film and a concert. It's really wonderful, so we encourage people to attend. If you are interested in the Holocaust and music, we did not do this intentionally, but this event and that event are really, really well connected, so I really encourage you, if you can, to try to attend both. We think that they'll be really wonderful in conversation with one another. I'd also like to advertise that Jewish Studies, the Sterling Institute, together with Muslim Studies at MSU, is sponsoring a 4-part conversation series called Conversations on Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia through the IDI office. We'll be discussing the history and current manifestations of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, which unfortunately have risen to the surface this past week. And we'll be talking about MSU, we'll be talking about global and national events, and talking about contributing to the inclusivity of MSU's campus community. Very much, we really, really want to encourage people to come. If you would like to come after this event, I have an event with a scan where you can register. It's also available on our website. Please consider coming to that. And I think that is all that I have to announce. So why don't we get started with an introduction of Dr. Jakob Eisler, whom I know personally through his connections through the East Lansing Jewish community. And I'm just thrilled. I've been talking with his cousin, Eve Brown, who I don't know where she is. There you are. Okay. I've been talking with her for a few years now about Jakob's work and talking about the possibility of bringing him here to speak. So I'm just thrilled that this has worked out. Jakob Eisler works as a researcher, I'm going to butcher this, in the Württembergian Church State Archives in Stuttgart, Germany, and as a lecturer at the University of Ludwigsburg near Stuttgart. His publication, Beyond Recall, which you can see here, a record of Jewish musical life in Nazi Germany, 1933 to 1938, won first prize for the best research in recorded music from the Association of Recorded Sound Collections in 2002. His research interests include the activities of Europeans and Americans in the 19th century in the land of Israel, German Jewry in the 19th and 20th centuries, and the history of Israel during the Ottoman period and the Mandate eras. So I'm so looking forward to hearing you speak, Jakob, and please, everyone, give your attention. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I have to thank you, Kirsten, that everything was prepared and that we could do it. And yes, to today's program, I would like to talk about the recordings of the Culture Association of German Jews 1933 till 1941. I will divide the lecture into 3 parts, and after the lecture of about an hour, you could have some questions and I could answer. I also need to say that when we started this project more than 30 years ago, and it was the research was about 10 years, we were 3 researchers who did the whole project. I did not write this whole book by myself, and also the CDs with more than 20 hours of music were not only collected by me. I had 2 colleagues, one from Holland, Horst Bergmeier, who unfortunately passed away several years ago, and Dr. Rainer E. Lotz from the University at Bonn in Germany, who was also working with us, and the 3 of us were working for a lot of years to achieve this whole project to be realized. So it's not only my achievement. Well, I will try to start with a kind of introduction, research questions, contemporary environment, and the founding of the Culture Association of German Jews. When Hitler came to power in 1933, anti-Semitism became a state doctrine. Any memory of the sound and voices of Jewish artists should be forgotten, as should the Yiddish language. The new rulers began to exclude Jews from all areas of public life and to eliminate alien tendencies from German art. The Jewish conductors, Bruno Walter and Otto Klemperer, as well as the composer Kurt Weill, represent hundreds, even thousands of lesser-known musicians who were either forced to immigrate or had to accept that they were no longer employed in Germany. This also affected around 8,000 Jews, Jewish opera singers, concert singers, actors, and orchestra musicians, men and women, conductors and directors. The contemporary environment. First of all, a few questions. When we started the whole project, we were asking ourselves, were Jews allowed to record music after Hitler came into power in 1933? Yes, it was not known. There was a big exhibition in 1988 showing how Jews could do and work in cultural events, but we didn't know if there were recorded records of films made by Jews and if they were allowed to do that. Then, if yes, how, when, and where? Which companies were allowed to do that? Who were the artists, singers, musicians who were allowed to do so? Were there any recordings made, and was there a kind of censorship during that time? So I will try to answer this in the lecture, and we'll see if we can answer everything. In the golden 20s, Berlin was the undisputed cultural center of Europe, yes, of the world. In the short period from the end of 1922 depression to the Nazi takeover in 1933, music, literature, theater, business, technology, entertainment, the fine arts, film and poetry exploded there. The city had over 4 million inhabitants. Only London was larger, but not in terms of era. No other city had more industry. 17 airlines headed for the metropolis, more than in any other city in the world. There were over 40 theaters and opera houses in Berlin. Numerous newspapers appeared up to 4 times a day and also offered additional extra editions. When Hitler came into power, there were a lot of Jewish employees after several weeks in theaters, in concert halls, as well as a vast number of freelance composers and arrangeurs, librettists and songwriters, entertaining singers and authors of political and satirical cabaret, dancers and performers of light entertainment. They all were on the street overnight, so to speak. The new rulers did not know what to do with this army of unemployed people who came from a respectable social background and had good connections abroad. You can see here I brought a picture of the German gramophone, the biggest record company at that time in Germany. The director was a Jew. Most of the most important employees of this German gramophone were Jewish, and in 1 month they all were thrown out of their work, although they were working there for years and years. And here you can see the Nazi group in the Deutsche Grammophon in June 1933. So you see in very, very short time there was... in order... the Nazis, the new rulers did not know what to do with this army of unemployed people who came from a respectable social background and had good connections abroad. However, they were aware that the regime's reputation would suffer from this scandal. In order to reduce the number of unemployed and to give them an income and an acceptable perspective, there were negotiations between the Reichsministry of Propaganda and representatives of the Jewish community in Berlin. These talks led to the founding of the Culture Association of German Jews in Berlin. That is where the numeric demographically largest Jewish communities, the numbers of the Jews of the Jewish community in Germany was the 5th largest in the world at that time. About 250,000 Jews were living at that time in Berlin. About 10% of those Jews, so about 25,000, Bund. They were able to rent a theater with the permission of the Gestapo censors. They were allowed to perform music and stage works and hold other cultural events. Only Jews were allowed to become members of the Kulturbund, and only Jews were allowed to attend all those events. Kurt Tucholsky, a very important Jewish journalist and poet, wrote from his Swedish exile different articles in the newspapers at that time, and I would like to quote 2 of his sayings. The one, a country is not only what it does, but what it tolerates. And the other one, an article that he wrote exactly when he was in Sweden in exile, in his Swedish exile, about the Jewish Kulturbund in Berlin. They play in strictly closed theaters, isolated like lepers, and I hear from here in Sweden, now we Jews will show them, the Germans, the Nazis, that we have the better theater. They hear nothing, they see nothing, they don't notice anything, quote end. The Kulturbund gave the German Jews a sense of belonging and apparent normality in those days. After 1935, branches of the Kulturbund, here is Tucholsky. As I say, after 1935, branches of the Kulturbund were founded throughout the Reich. So you can see here, Berlin is the biggest round on the right side, and all the dots you can see, these are all Kulturbund associations that were built all through Germany. The big rounds shows that it's a very big Jewish community. For example, if you go to the right, the biggest one, it's Breslau. And if you go down below, the biggest one down below is Munich, and so on and so on. So we can see where a lot of Jews were living. There were also a lot of members of the Kulturbund everywhere in Germany, and where the small spots are, these were smaller communities. Between 1933 and 1938, the reprisals against the Jews steadily increased. From 1939, they were no longer allowed to trade, and all shops were Aryanized or closed. At the beginning of the war in 1939, all activities of the Kulturbund in the Reich were banned until it was finally dissolved in 1941 in Berlin. By the time the immigration ban was imposed, also in 1941, almost half of the Jews in Germany, 300,000, approximately 300,000, had already left Germany. So we'll come now to part 2, the Jewish record companies' labels in the Nazi area, owners of the record company. I have to tell you that when we started the whole project, we really didn't know if there were any record companies at the time. And the good thing was that since my bar mitzvah, since I was 13 years old. I started in Israel to collect 78 records from different people who were throwing them in the 1980s away because they were turning 78 times a minute, and you didn't have any gramophones or any record machines to hear them. So I was starting collecting those records, and suddenly I saw, oh, a record from Germany with a Star of David on it. Why do they put Stars of David on record labels? And then I was connected with a lot of years before we started this project, and he said, wow, these are very, very rare records that you could get in Israel. You know, I never heard of any of those labels of records that you are telling me that you got in Israel. How did you get them? So I said, well, these were from German Jews who escaped from Germany and came to Israel, and their children gave it to me, yes? So this was how I came to 60 records, and this was the start of our project, because in Germany they thought that there were about 2 or 3 records recording at the whole time during the Nazi time, and then with those gigantic number of 60 records, we could think, well, maybe there were different record companies at that time. So we started, and we found that there was not only one company and not 2 companies, but 4 companies who could record in Nazi Germany with the permission of the German Nazis and the censorship to record Jewish music and normal German music. At the beginning, I will show you how it was in several minutes. So, the first company was the Zemer, in Hebrew, song, directed by Hirsch Levin, and it was built in 1932 till 38 in Berlin in the German Reich. The second one was Achva, Hebrew Brotherhood. Director was Ber Mayblatt, Berlin 34 and Tel Aviv. I will explain afterwards how could it be in Berlin and in Tel Aviv. Then Bema, but in Hebrew it is written Bama, which is the state. I think they didn't know really how to write it in English. They wrote it in Hebrew. So the director again, Ber Mayblatt, Berlin, Tel Aviv 35, and Lukraphone director Moritz Levin, 1933-34 till 1938 in Berlin in the German Reich. So we will start with the Jewish record company of Zemer. The first one who was established. As unbelievable as it may seem, in this intolerable political atmosphere between 1933 and 1938-39, several Jewish record companies kept going. They were tolerated by the Nazis until they had served their purpose and were banned. The 2 most important companies belong to Hirsch Levin and Moritz Levin, who despite their common surname were unrelated. We thought at first maybe they are cousins, but they are not related at all. Hirsch Levin was the owner of the Hebrew bookshop. You can see it here, Hebräische Buchhandlung from Berlin, from the Scheunenviertel. The Hebrew bookshop based in the Jewish Scheunenviertel, which was the Jewish quarter in the middle of central Berlin at that time. Hirsch Levin was an Orthodox Eastern Jew who also had qualifications to become a rabbi. He was born in the Baltic lands in Vilnius. During the First World War, he had to do forced labor in Germany. And finally, after the First World War, when he came back to Vilnius, there were so bad anti-Semitic attacks there on Jews that he said, I will return to Berlin and start there my work. So he stayed from 1919 in Berlin. In 1932, he founded the Zemmer label. Initially, a repertoire consisted of Yiddish comedian and cantoral songs. Now, I was very happy that to know what kind of records were recorded. We were everywhere looking for catalogs of these companies. But because the archives of all those 4 companies were burned by the Nazis in 1938, we couldn't find any historical material in Berlin. But the Yeshiva University archives in New York had this first catalog of Zemmer, and they sent us this to us for, so we knew exactly what were the first 7 records of Zemmer. You can see it S1, Zemmer 1, Zemmer 2, Zemmer 3, Zemmer 7, Zemmer 4, 5, 6, and we have it all here. And you can see, if you look at it, it's almost only Jewish Yiddish songs. Here you can see, this is something very, very, very rare. In the middle of Berlin, in the Scheunenviertel, was a Jewish Yiddish cabaret. Oh, it doesn't want to go further. So this Yiddish cabaret was playing, and I could find in some of the archives the programs of this Yiddish cabaret. And now we know, in that time when they recorded it, they didn't know that if they are going to record it, this is going to be the only track that will rest from this whole Jewish Yiddish cabaret in Berlin, because almost 80% of the actors of this Jewish cabaret did not survive the Holocaust. So these recordings that we have found of Zemmer with this Yiddish cabaret, and you heard now Jakob Moskowitz and Esther Moskowitz, I do not know why it didn't work. I will try again to track it and to see if we can hear it totally. No? Yeah, so it stops here. I don't know. We were trying to do some of it at first, but it's okay. So at least you could hear it, and we have found several of those recordings there. You have to know that in 1934, Levin expanded the range of his songs and included also Hebrew and Zionist recordings. For example, the Nazis allowed him to take recordings of the Hatikva, since 1933, the official Zionist anthem, later the Israeli national anthem. or a lot of Jewish records in Yiddish. For example, Ich fuhr heim, I drove home, and so on. From 1935, from 1935 he started publishing a lot of different records that were connected to Jewish festivities. And here you can see how complicated it was to know what records were recorded when. We went through the Jewish newspaper of the Jewish community in Berlin. You can see here a page of the Gemeindeblatt. And here you can see the advertisement of a record that I enlarged here. And we went page after page to look on thousands of pages till we found every record that was recorded through the advertisement that Hirsch Levin placed in the Jewish newspaper. So it was real hard work to go through all those Jewish, and we did it not only with the papers of the Jewish community in Berlin, but also with the Jewish community in Cologne and Breslau, and so on and so on. So we had a lot to do till we found out what records were recorded and when. From the year 1935, there was a regulation that only Jewish repertoire could be offered by the Jewish record companies. At the end of 1936, there was also a ban on new recording by Jewish performances. However, re-releases were still permitted. I have here also the choir of the German Kulturbund in Berlin, and also the Semmer, and you can see everywhere on the labels you have a Star of David on both sides, so it marked that only Jews could buy it. Now, what you hear now is the Maccabi March that was recorded. You will hear it in a minute. This recording was done in 1933 and afterwards 1935 for the Maccabi, the second Maccabi Games in Tel Aviv, but was recorded in Berlin. And you will hear it now and you will see how it's a march. We don't need to hear everything, but you can imagine that when this record, when the matrix, when the master came to the German censorship, they were shocked. How can Jews at that time even think of recording such marches that sound like such marches as German Nazi marches? So the record was recorded. We were very lucky that I found this one recording in Israel as an original master, but the Germans did not allow this record to be published in Germany because they wrote, if you see the papers of the censorship, they wrote, "This song is too German." You see? So and it was written by a person named Pollack, yes, a Jewish composer, of course, from Prague, from Czechoslovakia. So you can see how complicated it was for Levin to find the right balance of looking for the right recordings that they could record or not. In the year 1936, it was easier in 1936 to do some recordings because, you know, there were the Olympic Games at that time in Berlin. So the Nazis said, well, you can make more releases, and it was also easier. And one of a very, very important singer that was discovered by Hirsch Levin was Israel Bacon. He was a talented Polish cantor and recorded for Hirsch Levin about 28 recordings for the Zemmer label, mostly Yiddish folk songs like Brüderlich Aheim, a title deeply rooted in Eastern European tradition. And I met at that time also the son of Hirsch Levin, and he told me, as he was born in Berlin at that time, and he was an eyewitness how these recordings were made in the shop behind the desk in this shop in Berlin. And he told me that Israel Bacon, every time when he had to record, the mother of Hirsch Levin, the grandmother of Zeev, who told me that, gave him always a raw egg. He had to drink it. Then he ate 2 slices of oranges from Jaffa, from Israel, tasted them and said, now the sound of my voice is on the best. And then they started to record. So this you can't find in any archives, but I was very happy to hear those small stories behind those recordings from the son of Hirsch Levin, who passed also away several years ago. In 1938, the shop, during the pogrom night, during the Kristallnacht, was totally demolished by the SA. Around 4,500 records were demolished, and 250 masters on mattresses were destroyed. The following year saw Levin's appointment as rabbi for the Young Israel Synagogue in New Haven, Connecticut. He wanted to go there, but he was not able to do that because World War II had begun. In 1939, he was deported to the concentration camp in Sachsenhausen near Berlin. After his release in 1940, he was deported to Vienna, where he joined an illegal transport to Palestine, but ended up shipwrecked in Italy. His wife escaped deportation and went underground in Italy, and they were hidden in a very small village in South Italy by a priester. When the Americans came in 1944, they reunited in Italy and managed to immigrate to Palestine in 1944. You can see here Hirsch Levin, how he looked after he came out of the concentration camp. There in Israel, at that time, Mandate Palestine, Levin built up a new record company called Zion in 1946. This company was not very lucky, and he did not rest till he started a new company in 1947, which is called Hed Artzi. Hed Artzi was the first Israeli record company and existing till now, the voice of my country. So you see that the first records he had were the records he could save before the pogrom. He sent several of the originals to his cousin in New York, and the cousin in New York sent it to Israel, and he re-released it again. So these were the first records he did in Israel at that time. Now we come to the two other Jewish companies. The company of Achva and the company of Bema. The time runs. Okay, so the company of Achva was a company that was pressing only Jewish Hebrew songs that were sung in Palestine at that time. There was only one singer. His name was Joseph Goland, and he was already in Palestine at that time. But Ber Maiblat, a Jew who came from Poland and wanted to build a new record company in Palestine at that time, he did not have any recording studios in Tel Aviv. So he said to Goland, you know what? The German Jewish Kulturbund in Germany, in Berlin, in Nazi Berlin, they have the possibility to record records there. So he arrived to Palestine already in the 30s, and Ber Maiblat says to him, now come to Berlin and record records in Hebrew language there. And he said, yes, I will do that. Crazy. And he went back from Tel Aviv. He was at that time an actor at the Matate, it's a satirical theater in Tel Aviv, and went to Berlin back. You can see here the orchestra of the small orchestra of the dance orchestra of the Kulturbund, and we know every name of all those people. Here you have them, the trumpet and this and that, because I could find one of them who was recording in this orchestra at that time and was still living in the 80s. So he said, yes, of course, I have a small picture. I brought this picture with me, and this is this, and this is that, and so on. So now we know. And Goland recorded all those masters, took those masters in his suitcase, and brought them, after recording them in Berlin with the orchestra, in a synagogue to Tel Aviv, and there was the press machine who was doing it. Now, in Tel Aviv at that time, there was no material, because those records were made out of shellac, out of a very breakable thing. So Ber Maiblat said, it's no problem, we don't need shellac. We can press them on carton, on cardboard, exactly, on cardboard. And they started pressing them on cardboard. And you know, it sounded terribly. But they could do it. And I spoke with the wife of Joseph Goland, who was still living at that time. And she said, you know, the first time he heard those records, he fainted. Because it was so badly sounding, he said, it's not my voice. But then they became better. They found what cardboard is better. And after a year, the company was bankrupt. Now, how can you find those records nowadays? I heard during my military service time in Israel that a house in the city of Tel Aviv from the 1920s is going to be torn down, and in the cellars of this house they have a huge amount of 78 records from the 20s and 30s from a person who was living there. And I was serving at that time in the Golan Heights. I was 19 years old. I asked my officer to give me the permission to go to Tel Aviv for rescuing several records from this house. So he said, you are crazy? You are in a military service. You can't go to Tel Aviv because of historical records. So at that time, I don't know, it's now a little bit different in the Israeli army, but at that time, every 4 months you could get 3 days off. So I said to him, you know, I will do a deal with you. You will take 2 times of my vacation, so 6 days, and give me 24 hours going from the Golan to Tel Aviv, see if there are some records, and I will come in 24 hours. And he said, well, this is a good deal. I will do it. And I went to Tel Aviv, and the owner was so stubborn, he said, you didn't talk to me about that at all. The house is going to be torn down tomorrow. You can't enter the cellars. And I said, well, I will wait with my gun here till I can get any entrance to these cellars. And after standing there an hour, he opened me the cellars of the house, and I had only 1.5 hours to look at the 10,000s of records that were there. And I was looking, interesting, not interesting, 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 interesting. And in those whole records, I found there about 200 Jewish records in this place. There were a lot of classical music and all the others. I found immediately also Eliyahu HaKohen, that is a collector of cantorial songs and so on. So he came also and took all the cantorial records he could find, and I could save from the 15 records of Achva. I could find there 13 records. 2 are missing, and I am always, sometimes I have in the dream the thing that the 2 other places that I did not look, there are the 2 missing records that I couldn't find, but at that time, till now, we didn't find those 2 records. And in this room, I also found the 3 records of Bema, because after the bankrupt of Achva, Ber Maibach said, no, we'll press records on real material, and he did it. And it was were songs of Mordechai Roth, Emek Emek Avodah, and who will build a house in Tel Aviv, Mi Yivne Bait beTel Aviv. So these are very important records for Israeli music nowadays. And these three records I could also find in this place. So now you know how they came into this book. So we make now a jump to the fourth company, which is Lukraphone. 20 minutes? Yeah, 15? Yes.
Then we need a little more time to
Yes.
talk, so maybe in 10,
Okay,
15
10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah.
Yes. In the Berlin Friedrichstraße, the main business district, Moritz Levin ran the Lukraphone label through his radio house. He was a liberal German Jewish Berlin businessman. Many singers and instrumentalists of the Jewish Cultural Association in Berlin recorded for Lukraphone, which also not formally identified as such. A special as that. Moritz Levin, a typical German businessman, was born in Berlin in 1885. In 1920, he founded the Lukra company, trading with radios and records. He felt that when Hitler came into power, this could be a possibility to start doing a record company, and he opened the Lukraphone record company. The first recordings took place in 1934, and you can see the only picture we could find of him was in his trade association membership card. So this is the only copy and the only picture we have of Moritz Levin. And this is an advertisement in the Jewish newspapers. So you see, we did exactly as we did for Zemer, we did the same thing also for Lukraphone. We were looking for advertisement, what records were recorded and when, and so on and so on. Here we can see also another advertisement, and one of the singers who was very important, Marion Kögel. If you know pictures of Marlene Dietrich at that time, they really look very alike. Very thin, very blonde, very attractive. Here she sings the Kaddish.
Man fragt sich, was ist geschehen? Es heißt, alle Männer müssen heut zu den Soldaten gehen. Jankel, der Schmied, küsst sein Weib und sagt, wenn Gott will, dass ich dort bleib, dann wein nicht die Augen dir hin und lern am Abend mit unserem Kind. Mein Kind muss beten für deinen Vater.
So you heard this. This is her voice. She made a lot of different recordings. In the first years, Lukraphone was able to record records in German language. You see, it's German. Kaddish in German. Afterwards, they could record also classical music. They recorded Mozart, they recorded Beethoven, they recorded Schubert. In 1934-35, the Nazis or the censorship said no German music that is from German Aryans. Only German music that is of Jews. For example, songs of Heinrich Heine, who was a Jew. Or Mendelssohn Bartholdy is not German music, it's Jewish music. So they could record classical music, but only of Jewish composers, or what the Nazis said were Jewish composers. During the time, they could also record German cabaret, as Willy Rosen, for example. He was making German cabaret par excellence in German. And then, after the Olympic Games, they said only dancing music and Hebrew songs that are sang in Palestine, only songs that are written by Jews and in Yiddish, only songs that are not connected with Aryan German culture. So if we hear, for example, Paula Lindberg, she was a contralto singer, and I met her in Amsterdam with 100 years when she was still alive. And she said, oh, I heard about your project and I heard you found my record. I will come to the inauguration and presentation of this project to Berlin. And she died several months before we finished this whole project. But she was singing Schubert, and she was singing German songs, and afterwards she changed into Yiddish songs and so on. And we found in one of the places the last catalog of 1935 and 1936. And 1936, I told you Hebrew, then songs or dancing songs in different languages, French, Spanish, nothing that has anything to do with Jewish culture in Germany, but it was done at that time. I think I brought some example of a French song. So it's a tango. This is how a Hungarian Jew sings in French. And then you have La Cucaracha, you know? So dancing music from, and only now without vocal, and once only in Spanish. So no, that's it. And afterwards, there were also different songs in Hebrew that also were recorded. It's important to know that the last advertisement of Moritz Levin was placed in the newspaper in 1937. Moritz Levin left Germany to Italy in 1938 and left afterwards to New York. He died in New York poorly in 1969. Yes. I have here Dora Gerson, one of the most important singers of Lukraphon at that time. She had a real tragical fate. She was married to a German who became a Nazi. She had a daughter. She fled to France, tried to go from France to flee to Switzerland. The Swiss didn't let her go in, and she was captured by the Nazis, taken to a concentration camp in France, and from there she was deported with her daughter to Auschwitz. The only songs we have on her are on those Lukraphon records. A very, very, very talented actress and singer. And I have to explain to you that we did not only collect the records and republish them again, we wrote also about 500 biographies on all those singers in this book. Nowadays, if you go to Wikipedia and you look for Esther Moskowitz, you have everything about her in one. I was working for 2 months to find something about Esther Moskowitz, and it is all taken from this book. And nobody even mentions that it came from here, you see? So we have, from the 550 biographies, 500 biographies we have here, most of them were not published before in any lexica and any other. So it was a real hard work to do this whole project. It took, I started it before, or several years before, when I met different people during my research. But at the end, from 1996, when I finished my PhD, I started this project, and till 2001, in 4 years, we three were working like crazy people, and we were happy that at that time there was already an internet and a mail. So we collected those recordings from Sao Paulo and from South America and North America and Canada. And we even went to Australia to find records there, in Israel, in the whole of Europe we were looking for records. And at the end we found 95% of the records that were recorded in Nazi time in Berlin. So to make now a summary, we can proudly say that we were able to resample almost all audio documents that ever existed. The Nazis, who wanted to destroy and silence everything Jewish once and for all, have now lost. The Jewish voices live on. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. So we have some time for questions, and I'll walk around. So does anybody have any questions that they would want to ask? All right, start with Amy. There you go.
All right, thank you so much. This was just great and fascinating, and I look forward to seeing the book. I guess I have 2 questions. First of all, how did you decide very specifically to look at what was recorded versus, what was performed, right? There are so many different things going on. And then secondly, what can you tell us about kind of the dissemination and the audience for these records? Like, how many were they able to print, and who was able to access them, and all of that?
Yeah. Thank you. In 1988, there was a very, very big exhibition. It was before the fall of the Berlin Wall. There was a very big exhibition in Berlin made by Henry Broder, who made, together with Mr. Geisel, they made an exhibition about the Jewish Cultural Association. And they went for 5 years, it was a preparation of 5 years, all over the world to look for actors and singers and people who were acting on those Jewish stages all over Germany, who survived and were living all over the world, especially in the United States. And in this exhibition, they wrote in the catalog that there are only 5 surviving records that were in that time made by the Jewish Cultural Association. And when I visited this exhibition in 1988, the first time I came to Berlin, I was shocked because I knew that I have 60 in my collection. And then I wrote to Dr. Lotz in Bonn, and he said, we have to see if we can find financial aids or financials to do a project of finding the other record companies. And this is how because of that exhibition, we decided we can't leave it as it is and have to see what is. We did not really know how many records were there. And at first we thought we will only publish the biographies and not the records. But then we thought most of these people who were recording those records died in the Holocaust. And some of them came to different concentration camps where they sang the songs that were recorded here. So we said we need to rescue it and to have all those records collected in a modern kind of media. So it will be, and nowadays you can find also most of those records on YouTube, you know, and all made out of these records because we rescued it. And the second question was?
Kind of the audience.
Distribution.
Oh, yes. Yes, the audience, well, this was a very, very complicated thing to find out. Several records were recorded. They made a master, and the press was about, several were pressed 200 times, several 500 times. Those whom you can find more oftenly were recorded for surely much more. So, for example, who will build a house in Tel Aviv, which was a kind of hit in Palestine at that time, was released about 1,000 times. But I have to tell you that from those records, some of the records, we did only find 1 exemplar in the whole world. And for example, the record of Dora Gerson, this one, The World Became Small, it's about the global world and an accusation of the world why nobody sees what happens in Germany to German Jewry in 1936 and nobody says anything. And she says, we can hear the radio from China and from Shanghai. We are driving cars everywhere. We are going with ships all over the world. And nobody in the world is seeing what is. And the censorship in Germany did not see that. You see? She released this record. And this was the only record we found in Jerusalem at the possession of Shabtai Petrushka, and he was a dirigent of the Lukraphon small orchestra. I have been at his place. He was 89 years old or something like that. And I said to him, please give me this record. I will take it to Germany with my baggage and not in the not in the suitcase. I will take it to the airplane. I will bring it to you back. And he said, no, I still want to have it in Jerusalem. And then he decided to send it by post. And the record came to Germany totally broken. And we had to bring this record to a record reconstructor in London, the only one in the world at that time. And this did cost us $20,000 to reconstruct these two songs of Dora Gerson. Only, and I can tell you hundreds of stories how every song and every information we had looked for. Only one example, we had a cantor with the name of L.M. Goldwasser. And Bergmeier from Holland, he was so exact, he said, we can't write L.M. Goldwasser. What were his first names? So we were looking for him. He went from Germany to England, from England, to Switzerland, from Switzerland to England, from England, he flew to South Africa. And everywhere I was calling the Jewish communities, they said, L.M. Goldwasser, I don't know his name. He was always signing L.M. Goldwasser. I came to the community in Muizenberg in South Africa and said to the secretary, please make me a favor. If the next time you go to the Jewish cemetery to visit the graves of your parents, go and look for the gravestone of Goldwasser. I'm sure that his full name in Jewish tradition, you usually have the full name on the gravestone. I waited for 3.5 months and got a mail. His name was Meir L.M. Leib Meyer Goldwasser. So we have this Leib Meyer Goldwasser, his whole name and his whole biography and so on.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Yes.
Hold on one second.
Thank you.
You can use that.
Thank you for this excellent memorization of the whole culture. Are you working with Yad Vashem and with the other museums in the world to memorize all those stories?
Yes. Well, I have to say we have we released that in 2001, exactly 1 month before 9/11, and it was a shock all over the world. But after a year or so, we started connecting a lot of Jewish museums all over the world. I can tell you that dozens of Jewish museums all over the world, and especially in Europe, use this music for their representations because they don't have anything else. And not only that, we have here also a DVD of Andreas Weisgerber. It is also a whole story how we found it. It was lost for 60 years, and another cousin of us who was living here in East Lansing made Aliyah to Israel, and his neighbors are those Goldwassers. So you can see how small sometimes the world is. And in their basement, they had this film. So I found this film of Weisgerber. So no, I said Goldwasser, of Weisgerber in their basement, and we reconstructed it, and we gave this film to the Cinematheque in Jerusalem. So it's now in good hands, but we have a copy of it. And we didn't have to pay for it, of course, because we found it. Yes, there are a lot of, and what I am really very proud of, this documentation has a lot of material, and also a lot of links to the material where you can still find more material. So in the meantime of those 20 years, there are 4 dissertations, 4 PhDs were written only on the basic of these documentation. So it was a good choice also to publish it not only in German but also in English.
Wonderful. Anyone else? Any other questions? I actually have a question for myself, which is maybe a follow-up on the question about distribution. Did you find reviews? I mean, do you know whether Jews in Germany were sort of reading and sort of participating in kind of a culture where they're listening?
Well, there were different reviews, of course, of this documentation in Germany, of course, in Der Spiegel and Die Zeit. These are the most important weeklies and newspapers, but Le Figaro, Le Monde, in Holland were a lot of, and even in the United States we had a lot of reviews about this project at that time. I was giving also several lectures in California about this project, in the Holocaust Museum in St. Petersburg, in the Tampa Bay, in New York, and last year there is going to be in spring next year a documentation film how we did this documentation, which will be released in New York next year. So I will be invited to New York for this presentation of the film there, of this documentation. And yes, so it's still not been finished now.
That's wonderful. That's so exciting. All right. Are there any other questions? There are no other questions. This is perfect timing. Thank you so much for this really amazing project, amazing work. And thank you to everyone for coming, and have a wonderful day and weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.